What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, a very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here for a little late Monday night pod edition of the TarHeelIllustrated.com podcast. Because, AJ, I don't know if the people watching know yet. I would assume you would if you clicked on this video. But we're here to discuss Carolina's newly released 2025 football schedule that just came out. What AJ, about 20 minutes ago now? 25 minutes ago?
Yeah, around there. Yeah.
30, maybe a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, we had a piece ready to go, except we just didn't know the order.
Yeah,
the conference games, and throw a couple notes in there. It's interesting schedule for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's got some quirks to it and got some interesting things we're going to point out. Let's just get the elephant out of the room, though, AJ. I want to get your thoughts real quick on the fact that, I know Carolina fans don't want to hear this. There's a Duke State basketball game going on, kind of big basketball game going on this evening. ACC network at the same time is putting out the football schedule, man. I mean, it's kind of, you think they try to do that separately of, big basketball games.
This conference cannot get out of its own way. It needs new leadership. Jim Phillips is a wonderful man, but come on. Last week, hey, let's make it public that we want the second and third team to play for the ACC title. First of all, I can't believe that he would make that public. Second of all, there's nobody in that building that say, Jim,
Maybe not.
You don't want to get that out in the public. That's just not a good idea. And then now you got a game going on. They put the schedule out. The league cannot get out of its own way, man.
I had to throw you that one real quick.
But maybe they did North Carolina some favors with the football schedule.
That's a great segue, AJ, because that was one thing we were discussing before we got on camera, and I'll put a graphic on screen right now so you can see the schedule. I don't feel the need to go rifle through the schedule in 30 seconds and nobody really understand or be able to visualize what I'm talking about. So there'll be a graphic on screen right now where you can see the schedule and how it breaks down. But AJ, I'm going to read through a couple little tidbits that we talked that I kind of picked out before we got on here, and then we'll just have a little bit of an organic conversation, because I do agree that in some ways, and with how it lined up, there are some very favorable elements to this schedule. Just to point out a few real quick: no consecutive road games on the season. You got 2 bye weeks in 3 weeks, and what games scheduled? I mean, sandwiched in between those bye weeks. Oh, maybe Carolina's biggest game of the season, hosting Clemson at home. And just one more I'll throw in real quick before I kick it to you. Carolina only leaves the state 3 times the entire season. So, I mean, those 3 things alone show you kind of some of the, favorable elements that I just alluded to a second ago, but there's many more we'll talk about. It lines up well for a lot of different reasons. And we were talking about this off camera, AJ. I'm struggling to identify maybe what the toughest stretch is in this schedule because of those bye weeks and because of some other things. So, yeah, I mean, I think if you're a Carolina fan or, a member of the Carolina football program, Bill Belichick, you're probably looking at this schedule saying, okay, it definitely could have been a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, no consecutive home or road games.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Yeah, no consecutive home games either. Yeah,
they have a stretch of a month where they don't hit the road because they have at Central Florida, and then they're off Clemson, then they're off, and then they're at Cal. Mm-hmm. And it helps that they've got a long trip to Cal, but an open date beforehand, and that's going to be a Thursday or a Friday game at Cal. Mm-hmm. So then they get a return buffer before the next game, which I think is Virginia. So schedule works out well. They got a Monday night, but they got to play Charlotte. They have to go to Charlotte if that game's still played. And I say if. I know they would love to swap that game out and buy it out, but the university system does not want that to happen. They've been I know Carolina's tried to do that, and the university system has been very adamant about them playing that game. Carolina tried to get it moved to Bank of America Stadium instead of playing at the on-campus stadium at Charlotte, but it's not available because Charlotte already plays a game there this year. They're playing App there, I think, in the opener. Mm-hmm. I think maybe try to move it to a later date, to another year, and throw them some money, something like that, perhaps. The reason I say that is the idea of a team that might fancy itself as some kind of contender going to play a road game like that. I don't know why the ACC does that crap. They have some weird road games. I don't see the need in that. I'd rather them just play a home game because it's more gate. It would make more sense. If they could schedule something a little bit better, at least they could show the effort to the committee, perhaps, if it's needed, that they're trying to beef up the schedule. But a couple things that also stand out is that the open date before Clemson and then an open date after Clemson, that is weird. I don't remember something that quirky before. I don't know what the point is. I don't know why Carolina couldn't have had an open date later in the year. I don't know why it has to come there. I'm not a big fan of 2 open dates anyway. Why not just add a 13th game to the schedule so we can get more intel? If you can fit in 2 open dates, you don't need to. Just fit in one and have another game. They should have a 13-game schedule, get rid of the conference championship, get more intel, yada, yada, yada. We'll have a podcast about that sometime down the road here. I do think opening with TCU, people need to be careful. That is a program that was in the national championship game 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. That's not a cakewalk. By the way, it will be the second time they've opened at home against TCU. They opened against TCU in 1994 as well and beat the Horned Frogs. Going to Charlotte, then home against Richmond, that'll be fine. Going to Central Florida can be very dangerous. When the series was originally supposed to be played, Central Florida was one of the bigger, better programs in the country. They were awfully good there in that stretch. And the game, and they had one game canceled because of a hurricane, then COVID canceled another one. Central Florida was supposed to go to Chapel Hill last year, but that was moved to 2027. So the one that's being played this coming season was actually part of the 4-game series. Mm-hmm. So Carolina will finally go there. And the Bounce House, that's going to be a Saturday night. It's going to be on TV. Place is going to be rocking. They're already been pitching that as the Scott Frost versus Bill Belichick, which is fascinating if you're Scott Frost to have that put on you. But They lead the state 3 times, but they're all flights: Central Florida, Syracuse, and Cal. Mm-hmm. So I'm with you. I don't see a stretch in the game like, oh man, if they can, like basketball's going into one of those right now.
Yeah,
football doesn't have that. I think if anything, the trickiness around the open dates around Clemson, a team could put so much into one game that maybe an open date before that game isn't great. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of coaches would rather just be in routine and play their biggest game the week after a game. And then you want it. And if it doesn't go well, you got 2 weeks to stew and you got to hit the road and go to the West Coast. I think that's a tricky psychological period for this team, especially a coach that's never coaches and staff somewhat never dealt with this from a college standpoint. In the NFL, every game is a big game. There isn't the same roller coaster as there is in college football. So to view Clemson as the end all be all, you don't have those games. You have huge ones in the NFL, but not like this could determine the season in early October. So I think that might be tricky. It'll be interesting to see how Belichick psychologically handles that. I doubt he's going to play any games with the kids. It's going to be straightforward. I think that's probably what they're going to get all along. But what do they do during that open week? How much do they hit? How much don't they hit? Who does he seek counsel from? I'm sure Nick Saban will be one of the voices in his ear, but he has to run the program accordingly. So, and then I think what's also interesting is they don't leave the state the last month of the season. Mm-hmm. So they come home, they got Stanford, at Wake, Duke, at State. And I know that Duke won 9 games last year and it looks like could be a pretty competitive program with Manny Diaz there. Syracuse could be tough on the road, which is at the end of October, but that's very manageable. If Carolina finds a quarterback in the portal in the spring, which I know they want to do, with everything else this program's doing and how they're building and how they view themselves, this is a pretty manageable schedule, Jacob.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree with it. I think for the many reasons you just illustrated, just to point out a few more interesting tidbits about the schedule. You just mentioned it, Duke, at Wake, Duke, and at NC State back to end the season. We were talking a little off camera too about like when's the last time that's happened where they played, Wake, Duke, and State back to back. We'll have to look into that and see if we can find some info. But 3 games not on Saturday. You got the opener against TCU. You just mentioned on Monday night. Cal on Thursday or Friday, and then Syracuse, the one you just mentioned as well, on Halloween night. That one in Syracuse. So those are a few more little interesting tidbits about the schedule. I asked you earlier what maybe the toughest stretch on this schedule is, 3-game stretch, if you will. I'm struggling to find a little bit. I leaned in the beginning towards maybe Wake, Duke, and State, but we don't know how good Wake's going to be with the new coach, Duke. Can they continue that success? There's always a question mark about State, although, I think that is a difficult game for Carolina at this point because they haven't beat them in a while. I'm also looking potentially at that at California, Virginia, at Syracuse stretch as well. But with the, California game being on a Thursday or Friday, having to travel out there, you get kind of that extra day off, before you welcome Virginia into Kenan Stadium, which is a winnable game. So normally I think, AJ, what it would be at UCF, Clemson at California. But the fact of the matter is there's two open dates sandwiched in between the Clemson games. So what do you look at on here and see as maybe the most difficult 3-game stretch of the season? I know it's kind of early to tell because we don't know how these teams are going to be too, but at least on paper.
The Carolina we've known for a while, Virginia would be a trap game.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Because it's been before. It was the last time they came in.
Yeah.
So having to go to Cal and having to go to Syracuse won 10 games last year. Mm-hmm. Cal, I think Cal did some nice things. They really like Justin Wilcox there. They're giving him time to get that thing fully established, and they do. It's unfortunate they lost their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, who went to Indiana, I think. Mm-hmm. But you saw how tough of times the teams had out there last year. Mm-hmm. So I think Cal is not terrible. And that could be a dangerous road game to have to fly out there and play that one. Going to Syracuse in the Carrier Dome on a Friday night, if the Orange is good again, and that's a big if because they don't have Kyle McCord. Mm-hmm. That was a huge reason, one of the reasons they were so good this past year. That could be a very, very challenging game. I would agree with you on that. That's probably the stretch there, especially going out to Cal, coming off whatever happens with Clemson. There's two ways of looking at it. You beat Clemson, they think, oh, we've got the world conquered. And we got to have a week off. Everybody's patting them on the back, and all of a sudden they got to go to Cal and play on like a Thursday night or something. There would be some mental challenges there. If they lose to Clemson, they got to stew for a while and then go play that game. Maybe they're a little tight because suddenly that game becomes even more important when you look at the aspirations, what their goals are. And they will have a stated mission of making the CFP. So either way you look at it, these are hurdles that this program hasn't always handled well. So we'll see if they handle them well under Belichick. They weren't always on point when they needed to be on point under the last several regimes. That was the biggest thing that got Mac. Those double-digit favorite games that you lose. Like, just be on point and take care of business. They didn't always take care of business. If this team is the professional operation that we are told it's going to be, they will take care of business. So what does taking care of business means? Out of this world hype for TCU, but you should be able to beat TCU. Solid, good program. National title game a couple of years ago. They won 8 or 9 games this past season. That is no gimme. They're going to come in fully capable of beating the Tar Heels.
Yeah, that's a tough game.
Charlotte on the road, you screwed around with them last year. Just get out of there to win and nobody injured. Richmond, chance to play a lot of young guys, but Richmond's not a terrible FCS. Mm-hmm. Then you go to Central Florida. You got a challenge of a true road game, night game. It'll be national TV, a lot of exposure, a lot of attention, a little pressure to win that game. If they can get through those 4, okay, they can recalibrate, they can fix themselves, get ready for the Clemson. That will be the fork in the road. That'll determine which way they go. Now, if they lose and go this way, they have opportunities to work their way back. They got to hope that Cal's pretty good. They got to hope that Syracuse is good. So if they win a game there, it matters. They got to hope that Duke is good again, and beating Duke matters. You got to hope that State's better than people think, and winning there matters. They got to root for these things to happen, much like we've been talking about people with basketball. Now in football, it's the same thing because the CFP is bigger, and we saw how everybody hashed over the records and the schedules of everybody. You got to root for TCU to win the Big 12. You got to root for UCF to be in the upper half of the Big 12. You want those things to happen and see if Carolina takes care of business. So if this team does take care of business and they're a professional operation, they should find a way to beat TCU, provided they have quality quarterback play. We don't know yet they will. They should be able to go down and beat Central Florida, which is rebuilding big time, much more than Carolina is. And then in the ACC, outside of Clemson, I think that they, maybe at Syracuse, they should be favored in the rest of those games.
Yeah.
Maybe not huge favorites, but they should be favorites. And in the end, you got to win, right? Just win, baby. Isn't that what Al Davis said?
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's all that matters, man. That's what's going to determine.
We can do Al Davis now because his team played 10 minutes away from where Cal plays.
That's a good point. It's a very good point. Yeah, we're in not the Atlantic Coast Conference. I call it the All Coast Conference nowadays. But yeah, man, I agree. I think on paper, at least, we don't know what the Tar Heels are going to be. We expect them to be improved under Belichick, but it is year one under Belichick. And I'm glad you mentioned that TCU game and illustrated the fact that is a very tricky matchup. I know it's game one of the year, a new regime. I know Keenan Stadium's going to be fired up for that Monday night kickoff. I think it's going to be a spectacular and awesome atmosphere, maybe unlike we've seen before, at least maybe in my lifetime. But that is a tricky matchup. And that is TCU's a good program, AJ. Been a lot better than Carolina has been in the last 10, 15 years.
Not even close. In this whole century, TCU has been 3 times the program North Carolina's been this century. Mm-hmm. No question about it. That's going to be a good team that comes in. Sonny Dykes is a good coach. It was not a fluke they were in the title game a couple of years ago. They got blown out, but Georgia blew out everybody. They were still there. No one else was there. They beat Michigan to get there. So that's a program that still has some dudes from that game. They rebounded last year and had a pretty solid year. It's a very difficult opener for anybody. And for a club that's going to be sky high and not really know who they are yet, it's a very challenging game. Mm-hmm. And at UCF in week 4, it can be a very challenging game as well. So I like the schedule. I like the fact it's home away, home away, home away. A couple of quick notes. They don't have Georgia Tech on the schedule for the first time since 1979 when Jimmy Carter was president. And that was when the Yellow Jackets joined the ACC. Carolina did not play them in 2020, the COVID year, but originally Tech was on the schedule. So they've been on the schedule every year for the past 46 years, but they're not this year. So I think that's interesting. Carolina loves going down to Atlanta every other year. There's so much talent down there. But the way Belichick is recruiting, going out to California, they should try to get the Cal game moved to LA because they're recruiting a ton of kids in LA right now.
I know, a lot of OVs there.
Or play a game in Vegas so they can invite the whole Bishop Gorman team to the game. It's a different world, man. It's wild how they had 3 straight high school commitments from the state of California.
I know.
Not to mention 2 college transfers from the University of Washington who are from California.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
John Chapman, if he was still in the program, he'd have a bunch of buddies on the team now.
That's a good point.
But I think it's a cool schedule. Mm-hmm. I think it's a cool schedule because it's got opportunities, but you need TCU to be good. You need Central Florida to be respectable, and you need some ACC teams to really have big years. You got like Syracuse and Cal. Those road games, if Carolina could win them, and they're both top 30 type teams, that's going to go a long way because they're going to be on national TV. There are going to be opportunities to draw a lot of eyeballs. So what this team doesn't need is to lose at home to Clemson and have everybody else just not be what they're supposed to be. And you go 11-1 and you beat nobody that's in the top 25 of the CFP. Mm-hmm. Then it's a legit question. You played one good team. You played them at home. You had a week to prepare. You didn't beat them, that kind of thing. So we're having a lot of advanced conversations that may or may not exist, but that's what happens when you look at a schedule. There should be a lot of games, Jacob, and there should be a lot of full houses. Full house for TCU is a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. But Richmond, show up. People need to show up for that, have an opportunity to see this team continue to grow. Clemson's a no-brainer. Virginia should be a no-brainer, but it hadn't been in recent years. Stanford, that's the day after the basketball team hosts Kansas. Mm-hmm. Stick around, show up for the football game. And then Duke. Yeah. Did I miss a home game?
No, that's it right there, man.
6 home games. And then maybe they'll swap out Charlotte and get a home game in there.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. I know, like you mentioned, they've tried to. I know it's trickier than just, hey, guys, you want to go ahead and not play us and on September 6th, a lot more stuff that goes into it. But I think it's probably safe to say it's still a fluid situation, potentially. But who knows?
Maybe it is. I think it's 90% going to happen. Mm-hmm. I know they would like to find a way not to, but you also have to find someone else that can play. That has let's say you agree to Iowa to play a home and home, and Iowa gets out of a game with Youngstown State. Well, who buys who out? Does Carolina buy out Youngstown State and they bring in? I'm just throwing Iowa's name out there. I don't know any inside information. Yeah, but that would be a cool game to play. Mm-hmm. Now, back-to-back openers back-to-back to start the season against power teams. Why not? Belichick coached the NFL. Every game was a power game.
Exactly. That's a good point. I wouldn't mind it. It'd be fascinating from a journalistic
perspective. If you're trying to get to where they're trying to get to, that's what you want and that's what you need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, people may, if TCU's okay, well, they played TCU. What a crap schedule. Well, they scheduled them when they were really good. They scheduled UCF in that big series when they were outstanding. So they should get credit for that, but they probably won't.
No, they definitely won't. Yeah, I agree, man. Just to sum it up, I think it's a favorable schedule. I think there's a lot of reasons that we just illustrated in this 20-minute podcast that it's a relatively favorable schedule, but we got to see what this team's going to be and what this program's going to be under new leadership. And heck, we don't even know who the coordinator's going to be yet, at least one of them. So it's a fluid situation still in Chapel Hill. But I think overall, Bill Belichick, looking at your first schedule at the University of North Carolina head coach, I don't think you're too mad at that at all. And I think you'll be sitting there saying, okay, we can win some games on this thing. So that's how I feel.
No one is going to hold us to this, but first glance, what are you thinking?
I think this team probably goes.
I'm thinking 9-3, 5-3.
Yeah, I was leaning 8-4. Just because I don't. Again, Carolina, who's the quarterback? There's so many questions right now that we just don't know the answer to. So I think best case scenario will be a 9-3. I don't think it gets any better than 9-3 in Belichick's first year personally, but I'll go 8-4
right now, based on what we know now.
I go 8-4.
Okay, where are the losses? Where are the losses?
I think let's see. I think they lose at UCF. I even said off camera, I was like, I could see this team starting 2-2. I mean, you could realistically see this team starting 2-2. I may have to come back to that TCU game. I think they lose to Clemson. No reason to believe they're going to win that game. Doesn't mean it won't, but there's just no reason to believe they will. I might I'll throw an at California. Actually, I'll throw an at Syracuse in there as well. And then
State. I mean, until they beat them.
Yeah, I'm torn between TCU at Cal or at State. I'm torn between which of those they lose. I'm going to stay away from the TCU game, even though I could see Carolina losing that game.
I'm going to go a rough stretch.
Pageantry around it.
I'll
go at State until you beat State. I mean, let's just go with State right now. That's my 4 losses.
Right now, I have them losing 3 times in October.
You have them losing 3 times in October.
At Cal and at Syracuse.
Yeah, I could easily see that. That Cal game's tricky, just having to go across the country. And I don't know how good Cal's going to be. You mentioned the quarterback leaving, but they showed glimpses last year despite not having the greatest year in hindsight. But
let's remember they played Cal in 17 and 18 and lost to him both times.
Yeah, you were at
Wilcox was the head coach. That's when he started.
That was first year, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also interesting. 2018, they opened the season at Cal. They also played at Syracuse that year. Mm-hmm. And this year they play at Cal and at Syracuse, first time since then. They also played a game in Florida that year. That was the ugly Thursday night at Miami when Chas Surratt tore his ligaments in his thumb. Yeah. They have a game at Florida this year as well. So I think they'll close well. 4 games in state at home. I could see them 5-3 and then close well. People are excited at 9-3.
Yeah,
then we will revisit this quite a few times. And once we see what the roster looks like after the spring departures and additions, and there will be some, and I don't see them rolling with the current quarterback room. I think they'll add to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. We'll see what they got.
Yeah, man. That's an exclusive. AJ and Jacob's way too early.
Way too early. Don't put a dime on any of this or you're insane and it's your fault.
Yeah, do not take my word for it. I'll tell you that for free because this is firmly a prediction right now. Let's wait and see how the roster plays out and who the heck the offensive coordinator is going to be, and we'll go from there. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the Tar Illustrated podcast. Appreciate y'all watching. As always, make sure let's do this. If you like the schedule, if you're excited about football season, which I think most people watching this video should be when you consider who's leading the program right now, go ahead and like the video below. And I meant to mention this earlier, AJ. Shame on me for not doing it. We're on the race for 40K followers on Twitter and 20K subscribers on YouTube. If you help us get to that milestone, by hitting the subscribe button and now hitting the follow button on Twitter, links in the description below. We're going to be giving away some free subscriptions to TarIllustrated.com. So if you do it, you got a chance to be kind of entered in that pool, and you might get a free 1-year or 2-year subscription to Tar Illustrated, depending on how.
Or you could your name get pulled in both, and you stack them up. We're doing Facebook too. You can do that one too. Stack them up. You could have THI for free for a long time.
You never know, man. All you got to do, it'd be pretty easy. It's a couple clicks of a button. Doesn't take long at all, and it helps us out big time as well. You can go ahead and subscribe right now. Hit that button below right there. And again, all that stuff helps us out and helps our, grow out to a bigger audience and revenue and all that jazz that goes into running this business. So all of it helps, and we appreciate every single one of you guys. Make sure you guys hit the notification bell too, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.